Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Church in Bethesda. Today is Sunday, November 1st, still the season of ordinary time in the church calendar. My name is Ryan Phipps. I'm the senior pastor if it's your first time here, and welcome back if you've joined us before, but a very special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. We are going to be looking at politics today during our sermon/lesson time. I'm really glad you're here to join us. But before we dive into that difficult and polarizing topic, let's point our hearts where they belong, towards God, as we listen to some beautiful worship music from our singers and musicians. Enjoy.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise in your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in your lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. All the earth it will shout to your praise. Our hearts will cry, this bodies will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth it will shout to your praise. Our hearts will cry, this bodies will sing. Great are you, Lord. Your presence has come. Your spirit is moving all over the world. You're touching the nations. You're bringing your love. Your spirit is moving all over the world. All over the world. All over the world. Your spirit is moving all over the world. Your banner is lifted. Your praises are sung. Your spirit is moving all over the world. Divisions are falling. You're making us one. Your spirit is moving all over the world. All over the You're touching the nations. You're bringing your love. Your spirit is moving all over the world. Your spirit is moving all over the world.
That was coffee from last week. Excuse me. I shouldn't have used the same color cup. That's how I get myself in. Man, that was bad. That's how I get myself into those situations. And we need coffee for today's lesson. This is going to be, for some of us, a tense one. I want to start off by saying that I'm assuming that most of you watching this today consider yourself a Christian. And to make clear what I mean by that word Christian, when I say the word Christian, I mean one whose life and decisions are shaped by the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. If that's not you, if you don't fall into that category and you're watching this morning, of course, welcome. We're very glad that you're here. And you're always invited here and welcome here. But in the event that this seems particularly targeted today at Christians, this is why. As we looked at last week during our lesson, we saw that Jesus was so good at making the complex understandable. He could take something that was infinitely complex and dividing people and putting people at one another's throats and making it simpler for us to understand and to apply in our lives. Again, if you weren't with us, the passage from last week says this: Jesus is being questioned by an expert of the law. And the passage reads, a lawyer asked Jesus a question to test him. Teacher, he said, which commandment in the law is the greatest? And Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is equal to it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. If there is any core to the teachings of Jesus, this is it right here. To love God and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Now, if you haven't voted yet, or you're on the fence about who to vote for, or whether you're considering whether you should vote at all or not, it's my hope that our lesson for today will help cut through some of the fog you're navigating, because there is a lot of fog this particular election cycle for sure. A piece by Mark Fisher in the Washington Post, I think, sums up perfectly how many of us are feeling this particular election cycle. He says this: 1 week before Americans choose their path forward, the quadrennial crossroads reeks of despair. In almost every generation, politicians pose certain elections as the most important of their time. But the 2020 vote is taking place with the country at a historically dark time. Low on hope, running on spiritual empty, convinced that the wrong outcome will bring disaster. Historians say that in past bouts of insecurity and self-doubt, Americans often focused on foreign threats, the ideological battle with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, the worry about unrest in the Middle East after the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. The two sides have come to view each other not as opponents, but as deeply evil. And that's happening when trust in institutions has collapsed and each group is choosing not to live near each other. It seems there is no middle ground. Is that how you're feeling during this election cycle? Yeah, me too. I could go on and on this morning about why I'm voting, who I'm voting for, laced with my own subjective reasons for doing so. But this is more than just about my opinion. It's about dealing with objective reality. I could tell you in my own words why the two candidates, both who claim to be Christians, are or aren't Christians, further deepening our divides, or I could let you hear it in their own words this morning. And for the record, Both candidates say that they're Christians, and I believe that. But I believe that there are more whole, more healing, more correct ways of living out the teachings of Jesus. And some of us are engaged in them, and some of us aren't. And when I read the statements from our two candidates today, you might think that they seem to be saying the very same thing, but in different ways. But I see a big difference in the two. President Trump was interviewed by Religion News Service about his faith recently, and these are some of his responses. If you want to read the entire article, it's on whitehouse.gov, and we've also posted the link in the description of this video. But here is what President Trump said about his faith. I grew up going to church with my family in New York City. My parents taught me the importance of faith and prayer from a young age. Though I was confirmed at a Presbyterian church as a child, I now consider myself to be a non-denominational Christian. Last year, I was proud to become the first United States president to host a meeting at the United Nations on protecting religious freedom around the world. In my speech, I reminded the world's leaders that our rights do not come from government, they come from God. And I explicitly called upon the nations of the world to end religious persecution. I followed that event with an executive order on advancing international religious freedom that solidified America's own commitment to this critical issue by naming it as a foreign policy priority of the United States and promising that we will respect and vigorously promote this freedom. My administration has protected religious freedom worldwide by increasing funding for programs that aid persecuted religious communities. As I said at the United Nations, America stands with believers in every country who ask only for the freedom to live according to the faith that is within their own hearts. And we will continue to do so for as long as I am president. When former Vice President Biden was asked about his religious views by the Christian Post, this is how he responded. And again, if you would like a link to the full article, we've posted it in the video's description. Former Vice President Biden said this: "These abiding principles, loving God and loving others, are at the very foundation of my faith. Throughout my career in public service, these values have kept me grounded in what matters most. As a husband and father and grandfather, they are the cornerstone upon which our family is built. Through the pain of losing my wife, my daughter, and my son, they've sustained me with eternal hope. My faith has been a source of immeasurable solace in times of grief and a daily inspiration to fight against the abuse of power in all its forms. My faith implores me to embrace a preferential option for the poor, and as president, I will do everything in my power to fight poverty and build a future that moves us closer to our highest ideals. Not only that all women and men are created equal in the eyes of God, but that they are treated equally by their fellow man. We all matter in the eyes of God, and it will take all of us to achieve the healing America so desperately needs, to follow God's greatest commandment, and to love each other fully. Together, we can win back the battle for the soul of our nation, navigate the multiple crises we face, ending this pandemic, driving our economic recovery, confronting systemic racism, address the scourge of poverty, pursue immigration and refugee policies that uphold the dignity of all, and do everything in our power to ensure that all God's children have the hope and future they so rightfully deserve." Now, as I said at the beginning, we are Christians. We are those who live lives and make decisions that are shaped by the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And in reading through those statements from those two candidates, something stands out to me, and stands out big. One of the candidates quotes the words of Jesus, the founder of Christianity. The other does not. One speaks about how the words of Jesus shapes their choices both as a person and as a politician. The other cites the instruction given to them by a religious institution and then highlights their accomplishments in another institution. And this says volumes to me, not just as a pastor, but as a pedestrian who calls themselves a Christian. When someone has shaped your life, you know what they say. You quote them. In fact, you can't help but quoting them. There are people in history who have said things that are so universal, so solid, so profound that we can't help but saying how they have and still are shaping our worldview with words uttered decades, hundreds, thousands of years ago. And one of them does this. The other does not. And then there are the many, many issues. More specifically, the wedge issues, the hot button topics that get us to take sides so easily. How can two people claiming to be Christians be on different pages when it comes to the issues of our time? I mean, certainly these are the simplest ways to decide who to vote for, where they land on these hot button issues. But are these issues really that simple? For instance, let me just go through a few of them. Is one's right to life something you deeply believe in? Fine. Good. But do you really mean right to life? Or do you mean right to birth? There is a very big difference in those two things. If we're talking about the right to life, what about the life of the child in poverty on the other side of town, who, unbeknownst to you, had a parent that died from pancreatic cancer and is only able to eat because of food stamps that are paid for by your tax dollars? If we're talking about the right to life, what about the life of the kid in a cage whose parents are missing because they were separated at the border? If we're talking about the right to life, what about the life that follows the moment someone is born and all of the other moments that follow the moment that they are born? What about all of the other lives involved in that life? The parents, the siblings, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. What about the life of the mother of three getting ready to give birth to a fourth child, who is told that she has just a few minutes to ponder a very difficult decision, and that no matter how she chooses, the results are going to be devastating and earth-shattering? Life includes the whole span of a life and the quality of lives connected to that life. What about a right to life in that context? Are you pro-life, or are you just pro-birth? Are you open to the ideas that it's not as simple as a one-line slogan? How about taxes? That's one that really gets us revved up every election cycle. You think your taxes are too high? So are mine. But are you seriously telling me that if taxes were abolished tomorrow, that you'd freely give an amount equal to what you were taxed to charity? Really? I mean, you wouldn't keep just a little more for yourself? After all, you've worked hard. You're the one that deserves it. Someone else doesn't deserve it. Strangely enough, a Republican by the name of Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "Taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized society." So, if taxes were abolished, would you do what Jesus said with your money? Would you use it for caring for the poor? Caring for those that are without? Or would you do something else with it? So be low tax, if that's your standpoint. But are you generous with your money? Do you use your money to care for others in addition to yourself? Or finally, one that touches all of us, and this might be the biggest one. What about your health care? What about my health care? I pay a lot for my health care, and to be honest, my health care isn't that great. Would it shock you to know that the inflation of your insurance premiums and the amounts that hospitals have to absorb for treating people without insurance are almost the exact same amount of money? Did you know that a bulk of your insurance premiums go toward not health care, not treatment, but administrative costs? Oh, and a hypothetical. What if your neighbor has something deadly and contagious, but they can't afford to call for an ambulance because they don't have health insurance? Or maybe they do have health insurance and their deductible is really high. Would you then, with that deadly, contagious disease that your neighbor has, offer to drive them to the hospital? None of these issues, even the more debated ones, are in the least bit simple. Why? Because it's not just about how these issues impact you. It's about how they impact everybody. That's why our country is called the United States and not the divided states. The issues are about other people besides yourself. We are one nation under God. And there are more to the issues than sound bites and tweets and McNuggets. We owe it to ourselves and to the world to see the whole picture and how all of the pieces impact one another. This is not checkers. This is chess. This isn't simple addition and subtraction. This is fractal geometry. And Jesus says that when everything gets so infinitely complex, the very best way to navigate all of the questioning, all of the debate, is to get behind anything and anyone that encourages us to love God and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And that's all that I am asking you to consider today, if you haven't made up your mind yet. There is no perfect politician, but who gets closest to that Jesus said? If you are a Christian and Jesus says that's what matters most, then certainly we ought to cast our vote for the politician that gets closest to that. Which politician is being shaped by that beautiful ideology, if you will? Don't get stuck on an issue. Don't zoom in on a pixel. It's a big world. And now more than ever, we need leaders who will lead all of us and be committed to all of us with all of our complexity. And most of all, we need leaders who, if they err, will err on the side of love. As we go into a time of communion today, this ritual that reminds us that it is in the breaking of things where they come back together and are unified when they are ingested into a human life. I pray that we would examine and, if need be, re-examine our choices. Why are we voting who we're voting for? Do the policies, procedures, aims, goals represent more the one who represented this, or some phantasm, some distortion of this figure and his teachings? Let's pray about that now as we meditate and as we receive the Eucharist together, the table at which all are welcome. Amen.
Good morning, CIPE. Welcome to Kids Program. I would like to welcome Ms. Anna back and also congratulate her on passing the big exam. I also want to say thank you to Raphael for helping me with the Kids Program. So from Ryan's message today, he talked about the election, how we should look for leaders that are humble, faithful, kind, and who is always willing to serve us. So these candidates that we pick for the next 4 years, are also going to be our president. And I have 2 activities. The first activity is about voting. It's going to teach you all about voting and how important it is for us to vote and for our voices to be heard. So the second activity is about motivation, how our leaders motivate us to do well in our life. So remember to vote, and it is such a privilege and honor to participate so that our voices can be heard. God bless everyone. Thank you.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us, especially for this difficult topic today. I'm a firm believer that if we can't talk about the difficult things, the hard things, the polarizing things, especially in church, where in our lives can we talk about them? So thank you for joining us for today's lesson. If you would like to support the work that our church is doing here in our nation's capital, sharing the love of God with people in so many practical ways, you can do so at churchinbethesda.org/donate. Lastly, if you are here in the DMV, even though our church building is still closed because of the COVID pandemic, when we do open back up, or if you would like to stop by individually during the week, regardless of what political party you support, regardless of how you vote in this election, know that we love you, we are here for you, that we care about you, and if there's anything that you need, we'll do our very best to help you. Again, thank you for joining us. As you go, may you go in peace, and may you make peace wherever you go. Amen. Have a wonderful Sunday.